3 American pilots were shot in the legs, machine gun fire ripping through the cockpit of a helicopter as it touched down in hostile territory, blood on the floor, rounds punching through metal. And these pilots, these American warriors, didn't pull back. They didn't abort. They held their position while U.S. special operators poured out of the bird and stormed a dictator's compound. That's not a movie. That's not a video game. That happened in January 2026 on a mission so classified that the identities of the soldiers involved are still secret. President Trump just stood in front of those operators at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, looked them in the eye, and told the world what really happened that night. And what he revealed is beyond anything the public was told. Wounded pilots flying under fire, a mysterious weapon called the discombobulator that shut down every piece of Russian and Chinese military equipment on the ground, nearly 200 American troops dropping into a hostile nation in the middle of the night, and a dictator, Nicolas Maduro, dragged out and put on a U.S. Navy ship before the sun came up. This is the story of Operation Absolute Resolve, the real story, the details that were classified until Trump himself decided to share them. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this single mission may have changed the balance of power in the entire Western Hemisphere. Let's go. Let's reconstruct what we now know about the night Nicolas Maduro was captured. In January 2026, President Trump authorized Operation Absolute Resolve, a covert military operation to capture the leader of Venezuela. Maduro had been indicted by the United States on federal narcotics charges years earlier, but no previous administration had ever attempted to physically apprehend him. Trump did. Nearly 200 U.S. troops were involved. We're talking about the most elite special operations forces in the American military, the kind of operators whose names never appear in newspapers, the kind whose families don't even know the full details of what they do. Fort Bragg, the home station for Army Special Operations, was the nerve center. The operation happened fast. Trump himself described it as being over in a matter of minutes. But those minutes were among the most intense and dangerous any American soldier has experienced in recent memory. Here's what Trump revealed at Fort Bragg. The assault force went in by helicopter. Big choppers, heavy lift, the kind that carried dozens of operators into a landing zone. And as those helicopters touched down, they came under immediate fire. Machine gun fire, close range. Not some distant sniper taking pot shots. This was direct, sustained, heavy weapons fire aimed at American aircraft on the ground. 3 pilots were hit. Trump said they were hit pretty bad in the legs. Think about that for a second. You're sitting in the cockpit of a helicopter. You've just landed in hostile territory. Rounds are coming through the aircraft. You're hit, not in the arm, not in the vest, in the legs. And you cannot leave. You cannot run. You have to hold that helicopter steady because behind you, American operators are deploying into a firefight. Those pilots held their position. They didn't abort. They didn't lift off. They sat there, wounded, bleeding, while the assault force executed the mission. Trump said snipers were stationed and neutralized the threat quickly. That tells us the operation had overwatch, marksmen positioned to eliminate enemy fighters as soon as they revealed their positions. It was a coordinated, multi-layered assault. Helicopters on the ground, snipers covering from elevated positions, and operators moving through the compound. In total, 7 Americans were wounded. 7 out of nearly 200. And on the Venezuelan side, 83 killed, including Venezuelan security forces and 32 Cuban military personnel. That last number is critical. 32 Cubans. Cuba had military personnel embedded with Maduro's security detail. That means this wasn't just a Venezuelan operation. It was an international security apparatus designed to protect a dictator, and American special forces went through all of it in minutes. Maduro was captured, physically taken, put aboard the USS Iwo Jima, and eventually transported to New York to face federal charges. Trump himself shared a photo of Maduro aboard the Navy ship. The image went around the world. A sitting head of state, a dictator who had ruled Venezuela for over a decade, captured by American forces and photographed on a U.S. warship. Nothing like this has happened in modern history. Now let's talk about the part of this story that sounds like science fiction but is apparently very real. The discombobulator. Trump has mentioned this mysterious weapon multiple times now. At Fort Bragg, he brought it up again, and what he said raised more questions than answers. According to the president, a weapon or system called the discombobulator was deployed during Operation Absolute Resolve. Its purpose, to disable communications, disrupt electronic equipment, and disorient enemy personnel. And it apparently worked. Spectacularly. Trump said that because of this system, the Venezuelan and Cuban security forces never got a shot off. Now wait, we know machine gun fire hit 3 pilots. So what does never got a shot off mean? It likely means that the organized, coordinated defense that Maduro's security forces had planned, the integrated system of communications, radar, air defense, and command and control, was completely neutralized before it could activate. In other words, the discombobulator didn't stop individual soldiers from pulling triggers. It stopped the entire defense network from functioning. Radios went dead, radar went dark. Command posts lost contact with field units. The security forces protecting Maduro were suddenly blind, deaf, and cut off from each other. Trump specifically mentioned that Russian equipment didn't work. Chinese equipment didn't work. Think about the significance of that statement. Venezuela had been supplied with military hardware by both Russia and China. Radar systems, communications equipment, air defense platforms, billions of dollars worth of military technology from two of America's biggest strategic competitors, and the discombobulator turned all of it off. Everyone's trying to figure out why it didn't work, Trump said. That line is aimed directly at Moscow and Beijing. It's a message. Your equipment is useless against what we have. Your technology can't protect your allies, and we just proved it on a live battlefield. Now, what is the discombobulator actually? The Pentagon hasn't officially confirmed or described it, but based on Trump's descriptions, military analysts have speculated it's some form of advanced electronic warfare system, possibly combining electromagnetic pulse technology, cyber warfare capabilities, and directed energy weapons. The United States has been developing electronic warfare capabilities for decades, systems that can jam enemy communications, spoof radar, disable electronics, and create what military planners call a denied environment, a space where enemy technology simply doesn't function. If the discombobulator represents a new generation of this technology, one that can simultaneously neutralize Russian and Chinese military systems in real time, it's a game changer, not just for Venezuela, for every potential conflict around the world. Imagine what this means for Taiwan, for the Middle East, for Eastern Europe. If the United States possesses a weapon system that can disable the military technology Russia and China export to their allies, the entire global balance of military power just shifted, and Trump is telling the world about it, deliberately. He's not keeping it secret, he's advertising it. He's saying, we have this, it works, and your stuff can't stop it. That's not just military strategy, that's psychological warfare on a global scale. Let's pause from the strategic analysis and talk about the human dimension of this operation, because behind the headlines and the geopolitics, real people bled and real people died. On the American side, 7 service members were wounded. 3 pilots took machine gun rounds to their legs. 4 other operators sustained injuries during the assault. Their names are classified. Their faces will never appear on television. They will never give interviews or write books about what happened that night. These are the invisible warriors of the American military. Special operators who live in the shadows, who deploy to places the public never hears about, who come home, if they come home, and can't talk about what they did, even to their families. Trump visited Fort Bragg specifically to meet with these operators and their families in private. Behind closed doors, away from cameras, the president sat with the spouses and children of the men and women who carried out the most dramatic military operation of his presidency. That matters. Whatever your politics, that matters. These families live with a level of uncertainty and sacrifice that most Americans can't imagine. Their loved ones disappear for days or weeks at a time. They can't ask where they went. They can't know what happened. They just wait and hope. Trump told the assembled military personnel, "I have no higher honor in life than to be your commander-in-chief." And when he said it, he was standing in front of people who had put their bodies between bullets and a mission objective just weeks earlier. Now let's look at the other side of the ledger. 83 people died on the Venezuelan side. Security forces, soldiers, and 32 Cubans. Every one of those 83 people had a family, parents, siblings, some had children. They were defending their leader, a leader the United States considers a narcotics trafficker and a dictator, but a leader nonetheless. They were following orders, they were doing their jobs, and they were killed by the most lethal military force on earth. This is the reality of military operations. It's not clean, it's not bloodless, it's not a video game where enemies simply disappear. 83 human beings lost their lives in a matter of minutes. Their government says they were defending their country. The United States says it was capturing a criminal. The truth, as always, lives somewhere in the moral complexity of that gap. The Cuban casualties add another layer. 32 Cuban military personnel were killed protecting Maduro. Cuba sent its soldiers to defend Venezuela's leader, and those soldiers died on Venezuelan soil, killed by American forces. That's a diplomatic earthquake. Cuba lost military personnel in a direct engagement with the U.S. military. That hasn't happened since the Bay of Pigs in 1961. How Cuba responds officially and unofficially to the loss of 32 of its soldiers is a story that hasn't fully played out yet, but it's one worth watching closely. So what happened to Venezuela after its leader was literally snatched from power by American special forces? The immediate aftermath was remarkably controlled, and that tells us something about how carefully this operation was planned. After Maduro's capture, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez took over as Venezuela's leader. This was not a random outcome. The United States clearly anticipated this transition and was prepared to work with it. Rodriguez has publicly maintained that both Maduro and his wife Celia Flores are innocent. She has rejected the allegations that led to their capture. But despite her close alignment with Maduro and his political movement, something remarkable has happened. She's cooperating with the United States. In late January, just weeks after the operation, the U.S. and the Rodriguez government signed a massive energy pact. Let the significance of that sink in. The United States captured Venezuela's president in a military raid, and within a month, the new Venezuelan leader signed an energy deal with Washington. And this isn't a small deal. The United States has already begun marketing Venezuelan crude oil. The proceeds are flowing into U.S.-controlled accounts to be dispersed at the discretion of the American government. Read that again. Venezuelan oil revenue is being deposited into accounts controlled by the United States. The U.S. government decides when, how, and how much of that money goes back to Venezuela. This is an extraordinary arrangement. Critics would call it economic colonialism, the United States removing a foreign leader by force and then taking control of that nation's most valuable resource. Supporters would call it leverage, ensuring that Venezuela's oil wealth, which Maduro allegedly funneled into narcotics and corruption, is now managed responsibly and used to benefit the Venezuelan people. Either way, it represents a level of American influence over a sovereign nation that we haven't seen in Latin America in decades, maybe ever, at least not this openly. Trump, for his part, has been celebrating what he calls extraordinary relations with Venezuela's interim leadership. His social media posts ahead of the Fort Bragg visit highlighted cooperation on oil revenue and transition planning. He's framing this as a success story and the removal of a dictator, the stabilization of a country, and the establishment of a new relationship that benefits both nations. But the questions remain. Is this sustainable? Can Rodriguez maintain power in a country whose former leader was captured by the very nation she's now partnering with? How do the Venezuelan people feel about their oil revenue flowing into American-controlled accounts? What happens when the initial shock wears off and political movements loyal to Maduro begin to organize resistance? Venezuela's story is far from over. The capture of Maduro was the dramatic opening chapter, but the book is still being written, and the ending is anything but certain. Let's zoom all the way out now, because Operation Absolute Resolve isn't just about Venezuela. It's a message to the entire world. Trump said it himself at Fort Bragg. That night, the entire world saw what my U.S. military is capable of. That sentence is aimed at multiple audiences simultaneously. It's aimed at Iran. Right now, U.S. warships are positioned around Iran as negotiations continue. Trump has warned Iran of a very traumatic outcome if they don't reach an agreement. Fort Bragg itself, the base Trump chose for this visit, is home to units that could be deployed if diplomatic efforts in the Middle East fail. The message to Tehran is unmistakable. We just removed a head of state in his own country with 200 troops in a matter of minutes. Think about what we could do to you. It's aimed at Russia. Russian military equipment was supposed to protect Maduro. It failed. The discombobulator, whatever it is, rendered Russian technology useless. Moscow has invested billions in selling military hardware to nations around the world. If that hardware can be neutralized by an American system the world didn't even know existed 6 months ago, every Russian arms deal on the planet just lost credibility. It's aimed at China. Same story as Russia. Chinese equipment failed during the operation. Beijing has been expanding its military technology exports aggressively, competing with both the U.S. and Russia for international defense contracts. The Maduro operation just became the most powerful negative advertisement for Chinese military technology in history. It's aimed at every dictator and strongman who depends on Russian or Chinese equipment for their survival. If you're the leader of a country protected by Russian air defense and Chinese communication systems, and you just watched Maduro get snatched despite having both, how well are you sleeping tonight? It's aimed at Cuba. 32 Cuban soldiers died protecting Maduro. Cuba sent its military to defend an ally, and those soldiers were killed. The message to Havana is clear. Your military can't protect your allies, and trying will cost you blood. And perhaps most importantly, it's aimed at the American public. Trump is making a very deliberate political calculation with these revelations. He's building a narrative of American military supremacy, of a president who doesn't just talk tough but acts decisively, who doesn't just threaten dictators but captures them, who doesn't just fund the military but uses it to project power in America's backyard. The Fort Bragg visit, the revelations about wounded pilots, the hints about secret weapons, the photos of Maduro on a U.S. warship, all of it is designed to create a specific image, a strong America, led by a strong president, with a military that no one on earth can match. And with midterm elections approaching, that narrative becomes even more politically significant. Trump explicitly warned at Fort Bragg that if Democrats win the midterms, military funding would be cut and the base would be renamed back to Fort Liberty. He's tying military strength directly to Republican electoral success. Whether you see that as patriotic messaging or political exploitation of the military depends on your perspective. But what's undeniable is that Operation Absolute Resolve has given Trump the most powerful foreign policy story of his presidency, and he's using every detail of it to maximum effect. So let me leave you with this. 3 pilots sat in a helicopter bleeding from their legs while American operators carried out a mission that changed the course of a nation. 7 Americans were wounded. 83 people on the other side were killed. A dictator was captured. A secret weapon was revealed, and the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere shifted overnight. Operation Absolute Resolve will be studied in military academies for generations. It will be debated by historians. It will be praised by some as the boldest military operation since the capture of Osama bin Laden. It will be condemned by others as an illegal act of war against a sovereign nation. But here's the question that lingers above all the debate, all the analysis, all the politics. What comes next? The United States has proven it can remove a foreign leader by force. It has demonstrated a weapon system that neutralizes the technology of its biggest rivals. It has established economic control over Venezuela's oil, and it has a president who is openly advertising all of this to the world. Is this the beginning of a more stable Western Hemisphere? A region where dictators think twice because they know what happened to Maduro? Where American power creates peace through strength? Or is this the beginning of something more dangerous? An era where military capture of foreign leaders becomes normalized? Where economic control of another nation's resources follows regime change? Where the line between security and empire becomes impossible to see? These are the questions that define our moment, and they don't have easy answers. What we know is this. On a dark night in January, nearly 200 Americans flew into hostile territory, took fire, bled, fought, and won. They brought a dictator to justice, and they came home. Everything that follows, the politics, the oil deals, the global power plays, sits on the foundation of what those operators did that night, and now you know what really happened. If this video gave you the full picture, smash that like button. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the story. And tell me in the comments, was Operation Absolute Resolve the right call? Or did America cross a line? I want to hear from you. I'll see you in the next one.